a video tutorial on how to create a laser cut enclosure for a PCB designed in EasyEDA. So you can see here we've got the Mixie PCB ready to go, and there's going to be two files that we want to export from this. The first is we're going to go to File, Export, and we want to export a PNG of just the top layer and the board outline. So you can unselect everything else and click Export, and that will give us this file. The next thing what we want to do is we want to export a 3D model of it, and we're going to be using this in Fusion 360 for our renderings, and this may take just a minute or two to give you two files that are going to come in a zipped folder, an OBJ and an MTL. And so we can see that that has downloaded, and I'm just going to go ahead and unzip that right now. Okay, so we should see that we've got a PNG of our board outline, and then a OBJ of our 3D rendering of our PCB. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to open up Fusion, and we're going to go ahead and save this, and we're going to save this as Mixie Enclosure. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new sketch on this bottom plane here, and I'm going to create a rectangle. You can hit R or you can select here, and I am going to create a center rectangle, and I'm going to make this 100 by 100 millimeters. And that's because that is the dimensions of my board. And I can see that if I go over here back to EasyEDA, and if I click here on the G, and I say no generate Gerber, you can see that the dimensions are 100 by 100 millimeters. You might double check yours just to make sure that yours is the same. If it's not, you'll need to adjust your measurements accordingly. Okay, and so back here, I'm going to extrude this up, and I can do that by hitting E for extrude and selecting this face. I'm going to extrude it up 1.6 millimeters because that's the thickness of the PCB that we developed. So I'll hit enter, and that gives me something that is going to resemble my printed circuit board. At this point then, I'm going to say insert, and I'm going to insert a canvas. I'm going to go to my computer, and I'm going to find that PNG that I downloaded from EasyEDA, and I'm going to click open. And I'm going to select this face, and you can see it kind of lays it on the board automatically for you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little slider right here in the corner, and I want to expand this until the edges of the board meet up with the edges of the PCB. So right there. So you can see how that line matches right up alongside. That means that this has been scaled to 100 by 100 millimeters. And so I can click OK. And right now then I can see that I have a representation of my board. And this is going to help me lay out particular features of the enclosure that we are designing today. And so the next thing that I want to do is I'm going to begin sketching on top of this surface. And so I'm going to open up this sketch, and I'm going to edit this sketch. And we can see that we've got this 100 by 100 millimeter, and that's okay. What we're going to do is we're going to draw on top of the surface so we can kind of see where everything is. So I'm going to create sketch. I'm going to select this top plane here. I'm going to kind of move to a top view. And I'm going to choose a line, and I want to make a construction line. That's just a temporary line. And I'm going to draw a line from here to here. And that's going to help me kind of find the center of this board. The reason why I want to do that is I want to create a 2-point rectangle, and I want to do a center rectangle. And I'm going to turn off the construction line because this is going to be some real geometry. And I'm going to draw out a rectangle that is 120 by 120 millimeters. And this is going to represent the outside edges of the enclosure that we're going to build. So it's got to be a little bit thicker because the material that we're going to be using has thickness, and this will give it a little bit of wiggle room on the inside. So 120 by 120 millimeters should be good for this. The next thing that I want to do is I want to think about kind of where I'm going to divide the board. So because our board has kind of these two different layers, the buttons are at a different layer than our potentiometers, we're going to have this little step down, and we need to kind of divide this into the two parts where we're going to have that step down. To do this, I'm going to create a 2-point rectangle, and again, I'm going to use a construction line. Then I'm going to come here, and I want to kind of find the midpoint between these two areas. And for my board, it's about a 120 millimeters by about 55 millimeters. Is kind of right about the center point between where my buttons are and where my potentiometers are. At this point then, I'm going to use that as a reference point for actually drawing the thickness of it. We're going to draw a 5 millimeter rectangle. I'm going to choose a center rectangle, and we'll turn off the construction line. And I'm going to come here, and I'm going to make this 120 by 5 millimeters. And here you can kind of see the thickness of the step that's going to be emerging in our enclosure. At this point then, we need to start sketching in some features of where our potentiometers are going to go. And so for that, we're going to start with our linear potentiometer, which is this rectangle right here. I'm going to click our 2-point rectangle tool. And I'm going to come over and find this corner right here and just line it up as nicely as I can. And this is 88 millimeters by 16 millimeters. So if I sketch that, you can see that that very closely matches the geometry that we have there. Next thing I'm going to do is these circles. So I'm going to use my circle tool, and I'm going to use a 3-point circle. And the nice thing about the 3-point circle is I can just click on any 3 points of this diagram right here, and it'll create a circle that matches it. And so again, I'm just going to try to be as precise as I can. These will be slightly oversized, so it's okay if you're not like right on them, because ultimately these have a lot of wiggle room built into them. Okay, we'll do one more. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so now I've got an opening for my linear potentiometer and my 3 rotary potentiometers. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my 2-point rectangle tool. I'm going to make a construction line, and I'm going to trace this area out for the buttons, because we're going to make an opening for each individual button, and so we're going to kind of do some construction lines that are going to help us find exactly where those need to go. And so I'm going to start up at this edge because I can kind of see it a little bit better. And then for this rectangle, it is 60 by 30 millimeters. Okay. And then I'm going to do another rectangle, and I'm going to come in from this edge, and I'm going to come in 1 by 1 millimeter, again, with a construction line. Now at this point then, I can start making my first rectangle. I'm going to turn off my construction line, and I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to start from the edge of this 1 by 1 millimeter rectangle, and I'm going to create a 13 by 13 millimeter rectangle. Okay, and you can kind of see how that encapsulates this first button. Now I could go forth and do kind of that over and over again, but I'm going to use the pattern tool to speed this process up for me a little bit. And so to do that, I'll come up to Create, Rectangular Pattern. I'm going to select these 4 edges here, and I'm going to tell it that I want it to be 2 across by 4 down, and I need to tell it kind of what direction I want to go into. In this case, I'm going to say negative 15 millimeters. You can see how it creates another one right there. And then our distance down is 45 millimeters. You can see how it creates a set of rectangles here. You may need to adjust this just based on the particular orientation of your buttons. But again, you can play around with this and make sure that everything just looks like it's lining up nicely. And I can click OK. And here you can see now that I have my 8 buttons that are all sketched out. We're going to leave the Arduino alone for now. We will kind of work on creating an opening for the USB port once we have some physical geometry, but we're going to attack that a little bit later. But for now, we can click Finish Sketch, and we can begin to actually flesh this out into some real geometry. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to hit E for Extrude, and we're going to grab this part of the design, this part of the design, this part, and this part. And we want to extrude this up 5 millimeters. That's because our plywood that we're going to be cutting with is 5 millimeters thick. And so we're going to click OK, which is looking pretty good. I'm going to open up my bodies here, and I can see I've actually maybe made a little bit of a mistake because it joined itself with this board. That's not what I want to do. And so I'm going to take a step back, and we're going to try that operation one more time. That's my bad. So I'm going to just undo. There we go. All right, so I'm going to hit Extrude again. I'm going to do this, 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 and this. Okay, and I'm going to make sure that this says new body, which it does, and I'm going to extrude it up 5 millimeters. And again, we can see where it went wrong. So it jumped to join. We want to make this a new body, so it is separate from our little PCB. Okay, so we can now see that we've got a body here. I'm going to go ahead and name this. We're going to call this our top left, because it's going to be on the top left part. The next thing what we're going to do is we're going to create this little step that we've talked about a little bit. And to do that, I'm going to hit extrude again. And I want to extrude this rectangle, and this rectangle. And this time I'm going to extrude it down. And I'm going to extrude it down -5 millimeters. And we see again that operation is join. We want this to be its own body, so we'll click new body. And so now we can see that we've got a little step that goes down. Okay. And at this point then, we want to create our, rename this as step. And then we can want to create our top right-hand side. And so to do this, we're going to hit extrude again. And we are going to select this and this. And then we want this one, and this one. Okay. And again, we're going to extrude that down -5 millimeters as a new body. And click OK. Okay. And here you can kind of see that it's overlapping with the our step right there. So we're going to name this top right. And we're going to move it down an additional 5 millimeters. So if I click the move tool and I jump this down 5 millimeters, and then click OK, now we can kind of see we've got this little step going on right here. Okay. So that's pretty good. So that's kind of the rough outline of how things are going to work. I'm kind of done with my canvas for now, so I'm going to turn off this canvas just to kind of give myself a little bit more clarity as I work on the next steps of what I've got going on. So at this point then, we need to make our front of the enclosure. And so to do that, we're going to create a new sketch. And this time we're going to create it on this front surface here. So I'm going to click right here. And I'm going to use my line tool. And I'm going to start at this corner, and I'm going to come straight down, and I want to come down 35 millimeters. Okay. And I can click. And then I'm going to come over 120 millimeters. And click. I'm going to come up to meet up this face over here. And then I'm going to zoom in here and kind of get this one corner right here. And at this point, you'll notice that this kind of face right here has turned blue. And that lets me know that I have a solid face that I can now extrude. And so with that in mind, I'm going to hit E for extrude. I'm going to select this, and I'm going to move in 5 millimeters. I'm going to change this operation to new body. And I'm going to click OK. And now I've got my front face. And so I'm going to call this front. Now, if you are kind of keen, you will see that this is going to be almost the exact same in the front as it in the back. And so we can actually exploit that fact. And instead of trying to sketch one from scratch again, we can actually just copy and move this. The way that we're going to do that is we're going to click the Move Copy tool. We're going to select the point-to-point operation. And we'll select this. We're going to choose the Create Copy option. Our origin point is going to be right here, and our target point is going to be right here. And if I click OK, you'll see that we now have one that matches it on the back. Now we will need to be thoughtful. We're going to be putting in an opening for the USB port in here a little bit later on, so they won't be exactly the same, but for now they're going to be pretty close. So I'll go ahead and rename this one to back, just to keep things nice and organized. So let's work on, the meantime, about doing our two sides. So just like before, I'm going to create a sketch. I'm going to create it on this surface. And because this just is a square, we can just click our 2-point rectangle tool. And I'm going to come from this inside corner to this inside corner and hit enter. I'm going to hit E for extrude, and I'm going to bring this in 5 millimeters as a new body. and I'm going to click OK. Okay, and so now I'm going to come over to this side, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to create a new sketch on this face, a 2-point rectangle from this inside corner to inside corner, and hit enter. And I'm going to extrude that in -5 mm as a new body, and click OK. All right, so at this point we can see that we're kind of beginning to close in our MIDI mixer enclosure pretty well. I'm going to take a moment just to save, since I've done a lot of work here. We're going to do our final face here on the bottom. And to do that, oops, I got a little ahead of myself. This is going to be right, and this is going to be left. Okay, so we're going to create one more sketch right here on the edge, and I'm going to choose my 2-point rectangle tool, and I'm going to go this time from the outside edge to the outside edge, and hit enter, and I'm going to make sure I get both of these rectangles, and I'm going to extrude down 5 mm as a new body, and that's going to create my base for everything to sit upon. Okay, so we're making really good progress here. I did mention that we need to make an opening for the USB port, and so if I bring back my canvas, okay, we can kind of see where the Arduino is facing. It's going to be right in this area. And we're actually going to oversize this opening just to give us lots of wiggle room for the final USB port to get in. But we want to be a little bit more exact if we can. And so what we're going to do now is we are going to bring in our 3D geometry. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to insert, and we want to insert a mesh. And in this case, we're going to find our OBJ that we downloaded from EasyEDA. And it's going to take probably a moment or two. And here we can see it. We're going to click on this center and move to ground operation. Okay, and we'll be kind of doing some additional operations on this as well. But we just kind of want to get it in the right area. And we're going to go ahead and click OK. And here, we can see it's added here. Now, if we right-click and we say Edit Feature, what we want to do is we want to scale this mesh because it didn't come in quite at the right size. And so if we click on it, the scale factor that we're going to bring that in at is 0.254. Okay, and that's going to shrink it down to the correct size. And so if we click OK and close, and finish direct editing, we should see that it has kind of populated itself into our board. Okay, so I'm going to turn off that canvas, so now we can kind of see a little bit how this is working. So we'll come in here, and it looks like we probably need to adjust its height just a little bit, just to make sure it is hitting in all the right areas. So to do that, I'm going to actually select this front, and I'm going to change its opacity to about 50% so I can kind of have a view into where I'm at. And it does look like we can raise this up just a little bit more. So to do that, I'm going to click Move. I'm going to select this one, and I'm going to do Free Move. And I'm going to move this up just a little bit. 5 millimeters is probably a little bit too much. Probably closer to 2 millimeters is a little bit better. 2.5. There we go. Okay, so now that's going to give us a pretty good view on where our USB cord is going to end up. And so I'm going to, oops, forgot to rename this one. This is the bottom. And so I'm going to come back to my front face, and I'm going to change it back to 100%, just to make sure that everything looks like it is in good shape. Yep, that looks still okay. All right, so let me change it back to 50%, and we will sketch in where that that USB port needs to go. So I'm going to go ahead and hide a lot of what we've got going on here, just so I can really focus on just this one piece. And so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new sketch, and we're going to create it on the surface of this piece. And we're going to come in, and I'm going to do a 2-point rectangle, rather a center point rectangle. And I'm going to find a spot right in here that I want to work on. Right about there. And I want to be very generous with the overall size of this. And that's because, you know, the USB connector itself is relatively small, but there's a lot of plastic around it that we need to make sure that we've got an opening for. And so in this particular case, so I want to max this out almost as much as I can. And actually, I think I want to make it even a little bit bigger than that. So I'm going to hit escape here real quick, and I'm going to draw this again. I'm actually going to start a little bit lower with my center point rectangle. Yeah, so I'm going to make mine about 9 by 15. And again, this is just giving me lots of wiggle room just in case things don't turn out perfectly on the laser cutter, which we know they oftentimes do not. So I'm going to click Finish Sketch, and I can zoom in here. I'm going to hit Extrude, and this time I'm going to extrude through this face. And this time we do want the operation to cut, because it's going to cut out that little part in there. And there we can see that we've got plenty of room for that USB connector. So at this point, I can bring all of these various elements back. This is my little PCB. But I actually don't need it right at the moment, so I can turn that off. And for my front, I'm going to change its opacity back to 100% just to make sure everything's looking the way that it should. Okay, so it looks like I've got lots of wiggle room here. And again, these are kind of approximations. Our slider should stand up a little bit taller than this, but you can see that we've left it plenty of room so it can kind of move up and down without getting impaired very much. And at this point then, I'm going to go ahead and save frequently. I need to start making this into pieces that can be laser cut. And so we want to be very methodical about this. And so we're going to go little bit by little bit. And so I'm going to turn off every piece and work my way through turning each of these into an individual piece that is a DXF that can be cut on the laser cutter. So with this one available, I'm going to right click on this top face, and I'm going to say Create Sketch. Okay, and I'm going to click Finish Sketch. And here, if I close this and open this, I will notice that I've got a brand new sketch right here. And so I'm going to name this top left. And if I right-click this and click Save as DXF, I'm going to go to Downloads, and I'm going to call this top left. Nope, and apparently that already exists. Maybe I'm going to save it to my desktop and call it top left. Okay, well, I've done this before a couple times, so we're going to save over that as top left. Good. And then I'm going to hide this one, and I'm going to hide in the top left, and I'm going to come over to my little step, and I'm going to repeat the same process where I will make it visible, right-click the top face, create sketch, click Finish Sketch, close this down, reopen it, see that there's a new one right here. Okay, and I'm going to rename this, and this is called Step. I'm going to right-click it, save as DXF, call it Step, and so on and so forth. So now I will turn this off, go to top right, okay. Same thing, right-click the face, create sketch, finish sketch, close this, reopen this, rename this, top right, right-click, save as DXF, top right. Turn it off, and go to our front. Okay, now for the front, we're going to choose this front face, because this is, again, the face that we're going to be laser cutting. I'm going to right-click it, create sketch, finish sketch, close that, open that, rename it, front, right click, save as DXF, front. Okay, hide it, let's go to the back, turn it on, make sure that I cut the side that I want to, so I'm going to come over and look at it from this side, right click, create sketch, finish sketch, close and open, back, save as DXF, back, replace. Okay. Hide it, hide it. Okay. And let's move on to the right piece. Okay. Right click this, create sketch, finish sketch, close this, open this, right, save as DXF, right, good. Hide this, bring up our left. Okay, this is the side that I want to create my sketch on. Create sketch, finish sketch, close that, open that, left, right click, save as DXF. Good, we're almost there. And we've got our bottom. So I'm going to come to the bottom side, right click, create sketch, finish sketch, expand this out, rename this bottom, right click, save as DXF, bottom, okay. And so now at this point, the desktop should have the several pieces that I can now go laser cut and assemble together. I'm going to go ahead and hide my sketches. I'm going to bring back all of my pieces now. And then for documentation, we will of course want to do some renders of this. And so if we come over into our render tab and we go to our appearances button, you will see down in the library that there is a wood and even a solid wood option. And so if you expand these out, you will get an opportunity to color these. So if you wanted to do yours with an oak semi-gloss, right, you could come in here and begin to make this appear to be made out of wood. And that's going to be really good for your renderings. So make sure you do choose a good solid texture that is representative of the design. And you'll want to do a few renders of these for your Behance page. And so with this in mind, this is where we'll stop the tutorial. So you've got some good files that can now be laser cut, and we will cut these out of foam core first. And the reason why it's important to cut these out of foam core is, one, it'll help you get all your pieces oriented well, but also just double check the position to see if there's any small adjustments that need to get made or tolerances that need to get made, so that you can have good positioning of all your components and make any small changes that need to be made before you cut this out of wood. But if your foam core models turn out well, then you can make this out of wood and you will be in good shape. And that's it.